Most people live their entire lives without ever meeting their soul. Not in dreams, not in visions, not even in silence. But Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who dared to walk deeper into the abyss, he met his soul. And he spoke to it. This wasn't madness. It was a method called active imagination. When Jung broke away from Freud, he didn't just lose a mentor. He lost the scaffolding of his identity. The world he had built started to collapse, and out of that collapse came visions, strange voices, haunting images, the raw, unfiltered contents of the unconscious. Instead of suppressing them, Jung turned toward them. He began speaking with these inner figures. He gave them space. He let them speak back. He called it a dialogue with the unconscious, not metaphorically, literally. This was the birth of active imagination. It's not daydreaming. It's not creativity. It's not lucid dreaming. It's a deliberate descent into the inner world without losing contact with waking awareness. You sit, you listen, you enter into a scene, and you engage. Jung would begin by imagining a place, a desert, a forest, a cave. Then a figure would emerge. It might be a wise old man, a devil, a woman cloaked in red. These were not fantasies. They were archetypes, pieces of his psyche, manifesting as living symbols. He recorded these visions in the Red Book, a massive handwritten tome filled with calligraphy, paintings, and dialogue. But this was not art. This was spiritual surgery. Active imagination was Jung's confrontation with the unconscious, and it terrified him. At times, he feared he was losing his mind, but he pressed forward. Why? Because he believed the soul speaks in symbols, and if we ignore it, we invite chaos. The unconscious, left unengaged, doesn't disappear. It erupts in moods, in projections, in compulsions, in dreams we refuse to interpret, in relationships we can't understand. The shadow doesn't wait politely. It finds a way in. Active imagination is a way of facing the shadow consciously. You don't try to change it. You don't control the image. You let it play out. You ask questions. You listen. You record what happens. You surrender control without surrendering awareness. This is not easy because the unconscious doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in myth, in nightmare, in surrealism. You might meet a serpent with a human face. You might find yourself drowning in blood. You might be seduced by a figure you don't trust. And through it all, you must remain present. This is not a fantasy to escape life. It's a confrontation with what lies beneath it. Jung wrote, "I had to let it happen to me. I had to go through the frightening, maddening experience of becoming unconscious. It was a kind of madness, but I was not mad." That's the razor's edge. Go too far, and you lose yourself. Stay too shallow, and you learn nothing. The power of active imagination lies in its danger, in its rawness, in its refusal to be domesticated. Most people turn to spirituality for comfort. Jung turned inward for truth, and the truth was not comforting. The unconscious isn't a garden of light. It's a battlefield, a tomb, a temple, and a mirror. When you engage in active imagination, you enter into that space. You engage with the soul, not as an idea, but as a living presence. It has a voice. It has an attitude. It will challenge you, humiliate you, teach you. This is how Jung met Philemon, his inner guide. Not a symbol of intellect, but wisdom. Ancient, mysterious, a figure who taught him what books could not. And that's the secret. There are truths that no theory can explain. There are parts of yourself that only the unconscious can reveal. And unless you enter that darkness, you'll never find them. Active imagination isn't about analysis. It's about dialogue. Imagine sitting in front of a figure from your dreams. You ask it, "Why are you here?" And it answers, not with logic, but with image, with emotion, with mystery. This is not new. Ancient shamans did this. Mystics did this. The difference is, Jung brought it into psychology. He created a bridge between reason and soul, between science and spirit. But how do you do it? How does one practice active imagination without becoming unmoored from reality? Jung was clear. You do not lose yourself in the images. You engage them while staying rooted in the conscious mind. You observe, participate, but do not drift. You hold the tension between waking awareness and the unconscious flow. It begins with silence, not outer silence, inner silence, a stilling of the noise, the chatter, the desire to control. You sit, you listen, you wait, and then the image appears. Sometimes it's already there, in a dream you had the night before. Sometimes it arrives slowly, a figure, a landscape, a fragment of something you can't name. You don't invent it, you follow it. Jung compared it to watching a film that no one else could see. The scene unfolds, and your role is to interact, to ask, to respond, to question what appears, but never to dominate. You write everything down, every word, every scene. You draw, you sketch, you capture what can't be captured, not to interpret it immediately, but to preserve it, to let it work on you over time. Jung's Red Book was not a diary. It was a dialogue, a living testament to this process. In its pages, the unconscious becomes visible. This is why the Red Book is so powerful, because it wasn't written for anyone else. It wasn't theory. It was confrontation. It was revelation. It took Jung over a decade to complete it. He painted with intensity. He wrote in old-style calligraphy. He poured his life into it, not for prestige, but for survival. He believed that active imagination was not a technique, it was a necessity. Because when you suppress what is unconscious, it doesn't vanish. It festers. It leaks into your thoughts, your habits, your fears. But when you engage it, when you walk into the forest willingly, you begin to integrate. Integration is the key. This is not about solving problems. It's about wholeness. The psyche is not a machine to be fixed. It's a landscape to be explored. And every shadow you meet, every monster you face, every guide you encounter, that's a piece of you, waiting to be seen. This is what modern life has forgotten. We live in a culture of distraction. Everything external, everything fast. No time to listen to the soul, no space to descend. And so, we stay fragmented, controlled by unconscious forces we refuse to meet. But the soul does not forget. It waits. And if ignored too long, it erupts in depression, in addiction, in rage, in dreams that haunt, in patterns that repeat. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The soul demands your attention, not through comfort, but through confrontation." Active imagination is how you answer that demand. But it takes courage, because sometimes what you meet will frighten you. A demon, a violent child, a seductress, a god with no mercy. And you'll want to run. You'll want to say, "This is just fantasy," but it isn't. It's you, a part of you, a buried fragment, a wounded voice, a forgotten truth. And until you face it, you'll never be whole. This is the secret behind the Red Book. It's not about Jung. It's not a relic of psychology. It's a map, a mirror, an invitation to turn inward, to go beyond therapy, beyond logic, into the imaginal, into the symbolic, into the real, because the unconscious is real. It's not abstract. It's alive, and it speaks, but only if you listen. Active imagination is a forgotten method because it requires solitude, discipline, inner strength, things the modern world devalues. But if you make the space, if you give your psyche permission to speak, you will begin to change. Not because you become someone new, but because you remember who you've always been. The soul doesn't want to be saved. It wants to be heard. That's what Jung discovered in those dark nights. That the monsters were not enemies. The darkness was not evil. The feminine figure he feared, the soul, the anima, was his key to transformation. She was the bridge between the ego and the deep self. And through her, he met Philemon, his inner guide, his elder, a being of wisdom who taught him what science could not. This is not metaphor. This is method. Active imagination gives you access to the archetypes that live within: the shadow, the anima, the trickster, the wise old man, the child. These are not inventions. They are ancient patterns, forces, realities. You don't worship them. You don't follow them blindly. You listen, you learn, and you integrate. The goal is not to become lost in symbols. The goal is to bring those symbols back into life. This is how transformation happens. You bring the unconscious into dialogue. You face the parts of yourself you've disowned. You become whole, not by fixing, but by embracing. The Red Book shows us that truth, page after page. It is not a doctrine. It is a descent. And anyone willing to make that descent, to speak with their soul, to confront their shadow, to walk the imaginal path, they will begin to understand what Jung truly meant by individuation. It is not the ego's journey, it is the soul's. A journey that begins the moment you stop escaping your inner world and begin to enter it. So sit, be still, let the image come. The door is always there, and the soul is always waiting.